So one of the decisions that JVP has made in terms of how to do this well is to focus really on our local organizing efforts, to focus on the local offices of our congressional representatives. Most of us are not in DC very often. Some of us are here a few times a year, some of us are here once a year, some people never get to DC at all. So the question is, how can we, in an ongoing way, build the relationships that we need to build in order to be effective with our representatives? And I think the main thing about it is building these relationships, being consistent, going in again and again and again, presenting good information. It's true that they probably have the information already. It's about obviously educating new staff and developing relationships with new staff, but that you can't get anything done until you have that base of the relationship, and that they know who you are, they know that you're coming from a realistic, legitimate, respected place, and that you can deliver. The more you can build locally, organizing groups that can really put pressure on your local representatives locally, which can also mean getting letters to the eds in your local paper, getting op-eds in your local paper, being able to fill a meeting of when they come back during their recesses. That's what they feel. That's the reality of it, is of how we're going to make an impact on each of them locally. And it's a movement building exercise to do that local organizing. You can get people together, in your hometown or in your city and say, look, we want to go in and we want to build a relationship with this representative, and let's have a meeting and let's have a public hearing. Those are the ways that we can build movement while we're doing this congressional advocacy work, which I think is what makes it most effective and most useful for those of us who are coming from the grassroots. And you can make progress. They get to know you, and that's what makes a difference. And we've had a very good recent experience with that. As you mentioned, the Goldstone resolution in the Bay Area, where JVP is traditionally the strongest because it's where we've been the longest. We're part of a coalition called MEPAC. And that's a group of organizations that have been doing lobbying around on the Bay Area delegation for years now. It's really been years. But nobody voted yes on that goal. Nobody of the Bay Area delegation voted yes on that particular resolution. And I think that is an indicator of progress, and it shows that you can build these relationships and this sense of legitimacy, and more than anything, power. I mean, you have to be realistic that this is about power. And it's about, if it's not about money, then it's about people, and can you deliver the votes, or can you take away the votes? So that's something that we take heart from, that you can, over time, slowly move your representatives as you go along. Okay, we know it's the Bay Area, but you'd be surprised, not all the Bay Area is actually as liberal as you think. There's actually, once you go off the coast, for those who don't know, it's not actually that liberal, so it's not really as much of an outlier as you might think. And I did want to pick up a little bit on what Zahir was saying about members going to Gaza, which is also actually what we've been thinking of as one of our key asks. I think we've all noticed that the folks in Congress who have been the most active and the most reliable on these issues are folks who have been to Gaza, and to a lesser extent to the West Bank. And I think that's a great local ask, to simply say, go to your representative over and over and over again and say, please visit Gaza. That's a realistic ask. We're not asking them to stop supporting military aid. We're not asking them to not support the administration. We're not asking them to become anti-Israel or anything like that. What we're asking them is to please go visit Gaza. It's an evergreen ask. People who are inexperienced in doing congressional lobbying can ask it. You don't have to be a master of the legislative calendar in order to make that ask. You don't have to understand the subcommittees. It's something that's fairly simple, always relevant, and if we succeed with even a few more, then it actually makes a big difference. So I think that's very important. It's an ask that's something that can actually happen. It's not meaningless. It could have an impact if we can get more folks over there. So we're looking for things like ways like that to be involved in congressional advocacy. And I do want to talk just briefly about something that we haven't found an answer to, and I think we're going to be dealing with more as time goes on, which is the tensions between being active in the BDS movement and also still trying and not becoming beyond the pale to representatives as legitimate voices in our community. As of right now, although BDS is gaining a lot of strength, it's also still, I think, very much beyond the pale with most congressional representatives. And so the question is how we can be active in this BDS work, which I think is the primary work, and still be able to go in legitimately and talk to our representatives and have a voice. And I think, again, in the end, the answer to that is power. I mean, if members think that we can make a difference, something that Israel, I mean, I'm not going to go into all this, but something that Israel has shown in the last few months that it's very scared of. It is very scared of the growth of the BDS movement. And so representatives who feel that growing power are actually, I think, going to be more likely to be able to be responsive to our, in quotes, reasonable requests if we show that we can have an impact in these other mediums. I hope that's the way it's going to work. I think we're sort of in a little bit of a new place in terms of figuring out how that exactly is going to play out, and I can't say that I have exact answers for it, but that is my sense. My sense is that we can do principled BDS work and still approach our representatives in a way that's also gives us legitimacy and the ability to talk to them. And I'd be interested to talk about that more in the Q&A for folks who have had experience with that kind of work. And so I think finally the main point is that we want to engage with this work on our own terms. We want to be realistic and respectable, and we want to have good, hopefully perfect information, because that's the first place we get dinged is when we have bad information. We have to go in with good information. But we also want to be clear about our own goals when we're doing congressional advocacy and stick to them. And that can mean choosing not to weigh in on every piece. It can mean not keeping track of every little piece of Israel-Palestine related items that comes by, because you can get overwhelmed by the amount of information you need to master to even enter into the realm. So I think it's the important thing is to be strategic about picking and choosing what our asks are, and then being consistent with them over time, and really learning those, and really setting a goal with your individual legislators who can then slowly be moved along the spectrum that Nora set out to hopefully move them more towards the reliable or the solid column. You know, I think there's pitfalls in sort of falling into this expertise trap. I think it's incredibly important, obviously, to have the good information, to be aware of what's going on, and understanding these geopolitical trends that normally laid out so well. But at the same time, it does take a lot of resources to master them. And so I think groups like the U.S. campaign, which actually offer us ways to have that information without us all having to do it ourselves, are extremely helpful for all of us in building the movement. We do want to be, you just want to be careful about how you balance out those sort of two competing needs, because we're all, as we know, we're all dealing with limited resources in terms of the work we do, and we have to make choices, and so we sort of need to make those choices strategically. So I'm going to wrap up here. I think just the final takeaways that I want to let folks sort of, which I've said a few times already, but I'll say again, is that congressional work can be productive in movement building, that we want to make sure that the asks are commensurate with our true power, and that we'll lead representatives and their offices to take us seriously, that we need to be consistent, visiting over and over and over and over again, and that we need to view the work in the long term, not just in one-year cycles, but that we're building something over a period of time. And that finally, that we look at this work as a critical organizing opportunity to build our numbers, which is what's going to get us finally to be able to have a true ability to impact U.S. policy. Woo!